As the great superhero saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility. But that quote never asks, where does that power come from? For some, that power comes from their family legacy. Maybe it comes through years and years of training. For some, it comes through learning arcane arts. Or maybe you just learn the powers because someone has given it to you. And then, for some, they're cursed with terrible, frightening, and awesome power. And in this case, if you are an RPG or tabletop RPG hobbyist, I'm sure you might be wondering how to play a character cursed with awesome in your next D&D and tabletop role-playing game. But what exactly is a character cursed with awesome? Well, let's start with looking at TV tropes' definition. A character who's cursed with awesome is a character in fiction or non-fiction who has a terrible, quote-unquote, curse placed on them, if they were not born with it, that is actually pretty damn awesome. Often, these characters will bemoan their fate and go to great lengths to be rid of the curse, instead taking advantage of whatever cool side effects this curse may have. Some examples in fiction could be immortality, which has been done so many times, vampiric abilities, or being born or developing superhero powers that benefit you but also have major downsides. These downsides could look like losing control of your powers and destroying civilizations, people, or your friends. These downsides could also look like hurting others when you don't want to. Or maybe there's a social circumstance. Maybe the loss is that you want to look normal in a world where superpowers or cursed powers aren't a thing, or a downside could be the fact that it gives loneliness to the character. And those are only some of the ideas of what the downside could be when you're cursed with awesome powers. And of course, there are plenty of awesome examples within fiction. For example, the Thing in Fantastic Four. They're super strong and almost endurable, but they look awful, they scare people, and quite frankly, much of the general population finds them spooky and scary. Or Elsa from Disney's Frozen. While she's amazing ice school magic, her powers are scary and terrifying, and she even hurts her sister in one part of the movie. Or think of Wreck-It Ralph. He has superhuman strength, but more often than not, his strength is used to destroy things rather than to create, which is one of the main facets of the story. Another example in anime, because, well, I'm a weeb, is Naruto's Rock Lee. Rock Lee has amazing physical strength, but they can only use physical abilities, which is one of the main tenets of his character. Another great example is One Piece's Devil Fruits. Many of these Devil Fruits, no, in fact, all of these Devil Fruits have amazing powers from the context of the world. However, anyone who's a pirate, anyone who is traveling the sea cannot swim, which has great consequences in all of the main characters throughout One Piece. Another fine example from this season of anime as well is Denji from Chainsaw Man. He has great power, but, well, he scares much of the population, and, well, yeah, I don't think anyone would want to face off against, well, the Chainsaw Devil. And finally, to move away from anime and back onto movies, we have the crew of the Black Pearl in the Pirates of the Caribbean. They're cursed with immortality. And while it might seem great, it really isn't that fun to deal with, well, when you're in the Pirates of the Caribbean. And I'm sure you must be thinking, okay, Blurty, we get it. There's cursed abilities in anime, movies, and TV shows. We understand. What about tabletop role-playing games? Well, to give an example from the most popular tabletop role-playing game, that being Dungeons & Dragons, there are cursed items. One of the most well-known cursed items is the D&D sword, -1, or the Cursed Sword, or the Sword of Vengeance, as it's called in D&D 5e. This sword, no matter what you do, will always come back into your hand. It will reappear once you throw it away, and it will definitely reappear when combat begins. And some players lean into that curse, and some players don't. And that's the beautiful thing about being cursed with awesome. These powers can be super awesome, but also extremely devastating when the narrative and or encounters match that energy. So the great thing is that in tabletop RPGs, these curses can provide plot elements that are able to harm the players, create strategic and advantageous situations for the players, or even aid the NPCs, villains, or opposing forces that the characters might be facing. Being cursed with awesome means your character has this wonderful, amazing, and awesome ability, but also might be deadly or dangerous if used in really terrible circumstances, or might be detrimental to the character. So it's important to identify what is that detriment, what is that negative aspect. For your character, does the curse affect their health, their social standing, Does it create physical harm in their bodies when they use this weapon, item, or curse? Does it create emotional damage? Does it isolate the player? Or does it harm their family and friends when they tap into this cursed power? Identify what negative aspect this curse might have on you and the party. So players, tell your GM up front what this curse is. And obviously, your character doesn't need to come into this curse immediately. They don't need to be born with this curse. They simply need to know how they get it and what negative aspects result from this cursed power. And GMs, implement the negative effects of these curses when it's most relevant. For example, the player's curse is immolation. When they get heated up, pun intended, they start to emit flames that they cannot control. The character's powers flare up in the middle of trying to defend civilians from the PBTA. It may scare or harm the player's social standing since superpowers are looked down upon in this world. Or maybe their flames get out of control and start to burn the city or town down. For the player, it gives them a risk versus reward. Do they continue to fight knowing that this situation might get from bad to worse and cause flames and harm more people? Or do they use their powers to put down the PBTA? This gives a moral quandary for the player, and for the GM, it can create interesting situations on how to use the flames with the PBTA's powers, or how does this infect the encounter. This can lead into further plot developments for not only that character, but for the rest of the team's party, and their own social standing, as well as their own reputation. And since these are curses, GMs lean into curses being well forbidden, or bad, or having social negative circumstances. Depending on the game, make these powers feel like a bad thing, but also make them feel like they're good for the player to have. Maybe these powers are good for escaping from the PBTA. Maybe the PBTA is connected to this cursed power. For example, you're playing a low magic campaign where magic is seen as heresy. A character, quote unquote, blessed with magic might have a lot of baggage with that. As a GM, have situations where the player might be forced to use magic in public. Give the player the choice and see how they interact with the confines of the world that's created. Ultimately, curses should have downsides and good sides. There shouldn't just be all benefits and no downsides. And not to quote Chainsaw Man again, because I sound like a weeb, but I'll admit that, devil hunters. Devil hunters have to give a part of their body, some sort of major asset to themselves in order to obtain the power of devils to fight, well, devils. The same logic should apply to your game. If your character wants a cursed item, a cursed ability, they have to give up something. They have to lose something. There has to be some kind of consequence. And by doing that, this cursed power can have a lot of weight in the game. However, I'm sure there's a concern that's come to some. What if this character overshadows the others? What if the GM focuses solely on the cursed character rather than the entire team? Well, here's how I think characters cursed with awesome can synergize with others. These characters are really powerful in one facet, but also extremely weak in others. Lean into the negative sides. Those negative sides are where the other characters can be really helpful. For example, maybe your character is cursed with immense strength, but at the cost of this curse, this character cannot hug anyone, cannot be touched, and if anyone tries to touch them, thorns or some kind of magical energy hurts anyone who touches them. This means your character probably isn't the most socially active, or is terrible at interacting with people, so maybe they can't be the face of the group. This gives the cursed character a chance to either rely on the more socially smart characters or risk the consequences that this social encounter might have. That's an example of how you as a player can lean into your other players. As for game masters, create encounters that challenge or require the characters to work as a team, or create an NPC that's the foil to the PC. For instance, maybe you're in a magic school campaign. The wizard NPC is rivals with the warlock who's cursed. Have them be personal obstacle that the player and our team have to overcome. This allows for other players to be involved, not only just one single character. So, for cursed characters, it might be difficult to have them around in the game if you don't talk about having them in a game. Assessing Zero will make a big darn difference in how this character synergizes with the party, their powers, and mechanically how it might affect combat, social, and puzzle encounters. So, I think the best way to start this is to give the character someone they can relate to. Maybe a mentor or someone that they can relate to with their powers. And make sure that their powers have problems and negatives and circumstances where they can affect the other players. When you do this, characters who are cursed with awesome can balance out very well and can be a lot of fun for the player and GM as well. In fact, let me know down below in the comments section, have you played a character who's been cursed? What was their power? And what were your fun and really awful experiences? But I'm sure some of you might be wondering, what if I don't want to play a cursed character? Well, I think the next best character is a snobby elite, and if you want to learn more about a snobby elite character, definitely go check out this video. And as always, I'm your average everyday queer host, Blurty Disposition. You all have an awesome day.